Well, there you
I
go.
just really can't beat that. I mean, I know
You
it's
know,
wrong,
you know.
but all right. Speaking of food, I do want to talk about food safety with our next guest. They're co-founders of Whole Brain Consulting, William Matten and Brandon Hernandez. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hey. All right. With technology, how much safer and healthier can we expect our food to become? Give me numbers.
How much safer you can expect it to become?
Yep.
Um, well, I would say with the advent of technology, certainly the attack has been more on the traceability side of the ledger. Realistically, the science behind how your can of soup is made or your loaf of bread, those things aren't, that science doesn't change. And so the methodologies don't necessarily need to change. It's really the attacks right now on the system are solely on supply chain and reviewing and being able to be able to pull bad product off the market faster. But from a technology standpoint, there's a lot of, usually it's in vegetable washes and things like that where different chemicals and things like that may be able to use to control for pathogenic growth and things like that. But from the perspective of do you need to worry about your bread being bad or your tortilla chips or potato chips or whatever you want to pick, the science really hasn't been invalidated. It's just simply adding on to it.
Yep. Dr. Matten, what would you say?
Um, well, I think more than just technology, what's really made a difference is FISMA compliance, and that the government back in, what was it, 2003, Brandon, really made a concerted effort to make the food supply chain a lot safer. So traceability has become exponentially better. I mean, within 4 hours, a majority of products, we can figure out where the raw materials came from. We can figure out what they were using, where they went around in the facility, what distributor got them, what grocery store got them, and down to the shelf. So it's the technology behind traceability that's made it safer. Where previously, there wasn't, you had to report a major issue within 24 hours. You had to have a program to where you could pull it off the shelf, in a reasonable time period. So we as the consumer don't have as long of a period of risk because those products are taken off the shelves faster. So that's why you see, instead of like 30,000 people sick and 900 dying, you're hearing 300 sick, 97 sick, and no deaths. It's because of just how rapidly we can pull those products off the shelf.
Doc, that's really interesting. One thing I want to ask you, and you mentioned traceability and the technology of traceability. Right now, we have a salmonella outbreak that's taking place, non-COVID related, but it's a salmonella outbreak that people don't really know where it's coming from. How do things like this happen, and how can your technology sort of circumvent that or sort of fight that? How does that work?
It's actually more my partner Brandon's specialty if you want to go into the mechanics behind it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So Brandon, where's this salmonella coming from? What's happening?
So generally speaking, salmonella is hardier in powder forms, things that you produce, different seasoning blends and things like that. Now, with respect to what you're seeing in an outbreak, where technology really steps into this and where it becomes important is that as the FDA begins to pull strains out, what they're able to do is identify markers, kind of like a fingerprint, that says, okay, company X produced a salmonella-laden product. Because it had sat in that environment, it has actually changed from a DNA perspective slightly. So we can track the strain, and now we can assign that strain to a given manufacturing site. And so that, again, is where when the CDC and the FDA really need to go in and investigate, that's one of the first things they attack is the genome of what they're seeing, because there may be markers that lead them to a particular manufacturing site. And as we start to aggregate more of that data, you're going to get safer and safer food strains. Now, again, with salmonella, it depends on what the contaminant was, but most likely, because it is a soil-based bacteria, and that's generally from a harvesting practice or inappropriate storage, inappropriate silage. That's where the investigative part becomes a little more difficult. But again, that's where the fingerprint aspect really starts to play into now and in the future how we mitigate for those risks.
You're essentially saying for this particular outbreak Philip was talking about, the FDA probably has a good idea, and when we say unknown origin, it's just we don't know it yet, and it'll be traceable like in no time.
Right, because the FDA and the CDC, when they're doing these kind of investigations, they have to be absolutely certain who they're throwing under the bus. Because if I start to identify processors that had nothing to do with it, I potentially damage a lot of business. And in a recall scenario, something that Will and I talk ad nauseum with people about is you can never over quantify the damage to a brand or a company in a recall scenario. I can't, besides the fact that I want to keep people from getting hurt, I also don't know how much damage was done to my business. And so that's something that I have to factor. And that's something that the FDA factors in their investigations, because it doesn't behoove them to destroy a business that maybe didn't have anything to do with it.
Yep. I completely understand. Yeah.
And with all the changes that sort of happen in retail and supermarkets specifically, and we're switching gears here a little bit, the way the demand is going now, are smaller brands being shut out from the supermarkets? Are the bigger brands sort of taking over because of, trust and things like this, and people are very health conscious? What are your thoughts on that?
So, Brandon, you mind if I field this one?
How about it?
So what we've seen is huge increases in volume, and there's this area of food manufacturing that's called contract manufacturers. And the vast majority of the product that you see on the store shelf are made by contract manufacturers, which are manufacturers that make it for the benefit of another company. So I'm brand X. I don't actually produce something. A contract manufacturer produces it for me. As a category rapidly increases, you have to prioritize your customers. So prioritizing your customers, the people who you do the most volume with, are your priority. And if I have a product that I can run for 21 days straight, or I have a product that I have to stop my line, clean up for 16 hours, run for 4 hours, then set up the new line for another 8 hours, and then, it just makes sense to focus on your larger clients. The other issue that we're having is smaller brands that don't have a direct-to-consumer play, that were heavily retail-focused. What they're finding is that there's not the experience of the consumer finding what's new in the store. I mean, when all of us went into a grocery store, you'd see the cool new thing. You'd see the healthier or better for you version of like a Doritos, and you're like, I'll give it a try. Right? Because it's there and you see it. It's very hard when people are purchasing on like an Instacart or directly from a grocery's website or Amazon Fresh to do that discovery. So you don't realize that those options are out there. And then thirdly, people retreat to what they know. They treat to what they're comfortable with. So you might have been somebody who was trying, a Newman's Own sandwich cookie. Well, Oreos make you feel more comfortable. They make you feel safe. They remind you of your childhood when you're growing up. They're front of mind when you put in cookies as a search term. So smaller brands have had a lot of difficulty because new consumers can't find them because they're not going in the stores. Their co-packers aren't producing their products. The distributors are prioritizing items that sell rapidly getting to the grocery stores, so you're not finding yourself on trucks. It's a perfect storm for smaller producers. Now, if they had a direct-to-consumer business that was healthy, they're growing hundreds of %. All of our clients who have direct-to-consumer, even ones who had like 50-50 splits, 60-40 retail versus direct-to-consumer, are experiencing hundreds of % growth We've had companies that we never thought were going to be economically viable in the long term, turning profitable by considerable amounts of money, to the point where their investors are like, we might have tax implications this year.
Right. All right. Dr. Madden, I have to cut you off there because we're out of time. But I want to thank you both for coming on. William Madden and Brandon Hernandez. Great to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Take care.
See,